When we look at ice core samples, it doesn't support a pole shift occurring to that extent, not 90 degrees, but certainly 40 degrees or less, that's what the ice core samples support. These cataclysms would result in large loss of life throughout the planet, and that there would be portions of the planet, however, that would escape the worst of these winds and of these tsunamis, and those would be the survivors that would build civilization again from the ashes of that great catastrophe.
Thanks to the insider testimony of Corey Goode, we have now discovered that the people with the elongated skulls are survivors of a catastrophe that took place in our solar system. And what I find uniquely fascinating is that once they crash landed on Earth 55,000 years ago, they quickly made a treaty with each other. Even though they were at war, they decided to coexist on the Earth. One lineage said, "We will take what we would now call Africa and Europe." The other lineage said, "We will take South America, North America, and the eastern half of Asia." Now, what I find particularly intriguing is that when you look at the pyramid architecture that occurred in the aftermath of this treaty, there are slight variations. Each of these original lineages had unique styles to their pyramids. Let's talk about the pyramids that you see in Egypt and throughout Africa, and how those pyramids have smooth walls going up that are very distinctly not terraced. Then, when we go to Mesoamerica, we notice that there are distinct differences in the architectural style, where now you have step pyramids, which almost consistently show different courses.
Officially, they've been programming us that pyramids are built in Egypt and Central America. And that's wrong, because the pyramids have been built on all 6 continents. Probably at this moment in time, there is no living soul who have visited and investigated more pyramids than myself. In China, 250 pyramids near the city of Xi'an. We have pyramids in Indonesia. Our friend, Dr. Danny Hillman, discovered pyramid in western part of the island of Java. It is known under the name Gunung Padang, the Hill of Light. Cambodia, Southeastern Asia, the Koh Ker in the northeastern part of the country, a beautiful pyramid. Australia, 2 hours drive from Brisbane to the north, Gympie Pyramid. In Africa, 155 pyramids. The island of Mauritius, 4,000 kilometers away from the African continent, in the middle of the Indian Ocean, 7 beautiful stepped pyramids. More than 300 pyramids in Peru. And then Tucumã pyramids in the northern part, more than 200 of them. The biggest one, of course, Huaca del Sol, the Pyramid of the Sun, near the town of Trujillo. There are probably well over 100,000 pyramids, maybe up to 500,000. But more than 97% are still hidden in the jungles and forests.
At Angkor Wat in Cambodia, we have a very unique outlay of different pyramidal type sites. And, according to the work of Graham Hancock, those different architectural sites, although they appear to be randomly positioned, actually align with the constellation known as Draco. And what's best of all is that there is a drift in the Earth's axis called the precession of the equinoxes. And the alignment of where this series of pyramids in the Angkor Wat area of Cambodia line up with the position of the Draco constellation, this only works if you go back 12,500 years ago. And this is precisely the same as the alignment that everyone is familiar with the pyramids of Giza and the stars in the belt of the constellation of Orion. Another thing that is very fascinating about Angkor Wat is that when you look at some of the temples within this area, and there is one, for example, called Bakse Chamkrong. Oh my God, it looks exactly like the step pyramids in Mesoamerica. As you look at this overlay, notice the perfection of how these two different pyramids fit together. This is not a different society. This is a unified culture. But wait a minute, we've got Mesoamerica and we've got Cambodia. They're separated by the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, and yet they're using exactly the same architecture. The elongated skull physiology has been found all over the planet. We see it in Boskop, South Africa. We see the same type of remains being dug up in a dig in Siberia in a town called Omsk. We also saw reports that the Mongolians, or the Huns, as they conquered going west, had these strange elongated skull features as well. We see these skulls in the tombs of the elite in Europe. And then, interestingly enough, you have a different strain that we find in the Americas, both north and south. I find it very fascinating that this evidence is hidden out in the open. We see these elongated skulls all over the world, but we don't ask the deeper questions. This becomes a very important question of how the modern-day Illuminati, deep state, or cabal actually do believe that they are the remnant of these people with the elongated skulls.
The deep state consists of the Rothschilds, the British royal family, the Vatican, and the Chabad cult, which many Jews do not consider to be Jewish. They consider it to be a Khazarian criminal organization. The secret societies are higher than the countries in terms of the loyalties of their membership. Whether it began with with stellar civilizations, I've met someone who purports to be from a stellar civilization, and I've been informed they don't like the term extraterrestrial. They prefer stellar civilization. Be that as it may, whether you believe in extraterrestrial stuff or not, it's clear that here on Earth there's a 1%, there's a 99%. And in 2012, the forces of good started to win. And the Mayans and others had predicted this, and I think the way I explain it to myself is that the collective meditation and prayer that was being done ended up bringing in the positive stellar civilizations, and now the negative stellar civilizations are on the run, and the elites are on the run. Now the good news is I think human beings are an experiment in free will, and I believe that if we can resurrect our individual sovereignty, there is no power in the galaxy that can stand up to us.
As I got older, there was another series of high strangeness events that took place. I was often having high fevers as I grew up. And these fevers were correlated with two distinct phenomena that would always happen. The first thing is that I would have a very strong sense of pressure in my ears, and I would start yelling to try to get over the sound. The other thing that would happen is I would get geometry in these hallucinations during the fevers. I would feel as if the world around me had been turned into geometry. I would see strange geometric patterns like mandalas superimposed over everything. This was not at all enjoyable. It was very unpleasant. I would be screaming, and my mother would have to calm me down. As I got older, I discovered that those fevers were most likely an extraterrestrial phenomena in nature, that there was something going on. The way these extraterrestrials on the benevolent side change our DNA is through a virus. Now remember, what does a virus do? It defeats the cell wall and injects its own DNA into your cell. You can take a cell that defines who you are with its DNA and inject new code into it with a virus. I remember having dreams where I was seeing benevolent, ordinary, human-looking people like the old man in robes coming into my space, landing in this roughly bus-shaped craft in my yard, bringing me on board, and actually giving me these injections of these viruses so that my DNA could be modified and upgraded. I would wake up in the middle of the night, I would be on some sort of program that I didn't consciously have any objection to, where I felt like it was time to go to school. I would walk out the side door like it was time to go to school, but I would notice that everything was black, and I'd say, what the heck is going on? I'd turn around and go back into the house. Now, this appears again to be in the high strangeness category, but it seems that at that moment where I'm standing there with my backpack looking at the darkness of the night, that I'm being spliced back in, and I would lose the memory from the time that I was standing there to the time that I would return to the exact same location. This is actually a very common thing that you read about in the contactee literature regarding these extraterrestrial contact experiences. Now, it would seem in these experiences that I was being brought on board some sort of extraterrestrial craft, there was some sort of training taking place, and these classes actually could take place for potentially weeks of time, and then I would be spliced right back in till the moment I left. It does appear that there is a whole section of my life that I have no conscious access to at this time, and certain insiders have told me that because of my unique family background, where the Wilcock line is an English aristocratic bloodline from Yorkshire, that I apparently do already have some of this extraterrestrial DNA.
Right now, millions of people on this planet are already in contact with extraterrestrials and they don't even realize it. These beings are contacting us through our dreams and through our subconscious, and many of the thoughts and ideas that we're coming up with don't originate from us. The purpose of contacting people through their dreams and subconscious is to acclimate them and prepare them for open face-to-face contact.
Well, I'm James Gillen, and we're here at ECETI Ranch. Well, ECETI stands for Enlightened Contact with Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Yeah, the beginning of ECETI actually came in visions. And I kept seeing visions of this massive mountain. And when I first came on the property, it was just unbelievable. It was like a movie out of the Old Testament or something. The mountain just, clouds started changing. There's a giant lenticular cloud. It was lit up orange underneath. I got such a download, I was getting tears. I was just standing there looking at the mountain crying, and I go, this is it. This is the vision. I was focused on creating a healing center, like a retreat center, and I wanted to just make it totally eclectic. I didn't want to pigeonhole it or keep it with any one group. And about probably halfway through of building this center, they started showing up. The ships started showing up.
It's got a double, it's weird. Whoa, whoa, thank you. That is unbelievably bright. Whoa, look at that, Woohoo, whoa.
And the first encounter was an all-day meditation. I was meditating, and I had a beautiful transmission coming to me about the earth and humanity and our ancient history, who we are and how we've gotten to where we are and what needs to happen to heal, you know, to clean up the planet and the consciousness here. And so I asked them, where are you coming from? And they said, actually, we're on a ship. And I didn't even make it to the door, and my sister and her friends came up banging on the door, and they go, did you see it? Did you see it? And I said, see what? There was a huge light ship hovering right over the house here. So that was my first encounter where I realized I needed to start doing some research on tying in the higher dimensional beings and the spiritually and technologically advanced off-world visitors into the spirituality side of things. When you go within and start expanding in consciousness, we find out we're not just a body and a personality, we're a spirit and a soul, and that's a multidimensional aspect of ourselves. And so as you expand in awareness, you start taking in these other dimensions, and contact is a natural occurrence when that happens.
My name is Barry Littleton. I do stock trading, level 2 options, and I also am involved in social services. In the UFO field, I'm kind of just stepping forward. It started off with childhood experiences, so that's one of the things, but then I went into what I call adult onset experiences, which included missing time. So we're looking almost 20 hours of my life was missing behind being upon board these ships. When I talk about it now, it sounds very uniform, but it took a lifetime to put the pieces together. Instead, I was more into hiding it to a degree and trying to just be normal and whatever it took to kind of try to blend in instead of talk about these experiences, anything like what I'm doing now. I always heard it as termed as demonic and dealing with demons, and that labels somebody as demons and crazy and puts the most negative connotation on it possible. So that's one problem I think there is there, and that's a real way to block people from talking about this and ever coming forward. These beings, they never would give me any revelations about the future, but they only gave me information concerning the earth and always the technologies, and there was a lot of love energy that came off them. Enough to where being in the presence of a non-human, it would somewhat chill you out, because it's not just a normal thing, and there's a great risk of panic there, but the type of vibration coming off them, coming off their biofields, was very calming. It started off with a being that was insectoid, and when he would come and interact with me in my daily life, he was doing something with the optic nerves, I'm sure of that, to make him appear even more human. But when I saw him on board craft, he was definitely insectoid and ancient. Smaller, okay? That'd be the first being that stepped forward to me. There was another one stepped forward that was Mana, but it looks like Earth's brain coral is the way this being's head looked, okay? And taller, but very peaceful and also very scientific to a degree. I've also seen small blue beings that claim to be from Andromeda, maybe about 2.5 feet tall, I would say. Those are some. And then there's the other portion that I had a hard time dealing with, because there's no frame of reference for this, is that beings that are on board these crafts that are non-corporeal, non-physical, they have different containers for their consciousness, like plasma or light configurations. The inside of the crafts themselves that I've seen look like type of a fungus, a type of a hard mushroom that's slightly different. So that told me that these craft are actually organic. If we're going to become a type 1 civilization, we need to start just not incorporating the spiritual, but also the organic components into our space travel, definitely. I believe what is happening on the planet right now is a shift in consciousness. And meaning not, I've heard it called other things such as ascension, we're going to go to another dimension. I've heard all these things, but I think in reality, it's a shift of consciousness. Because at least in my opinion, 85 to 90% of our population has had extreme contact, but they can't remember it. They're unaware of it due to the fact our perception is so molded. Internet has helped with starting communication amongst what I call melanin-dominant contactees, experiencers. And like I said, it was the indoctrination of religion that kind of stopped that to a degree. But right now, I think that the fact that certain people are coming forward and taking it through darts, a few darts, is making it more accessible to others and others more comfortable about it. I believe they are reaching out because they're wanting right now to help us with this shift in consciousness. And what has been shown to me is humanity does have a type of free will, but we're not going to be allowed to destroy the earth anymore.
Yeah, my name is Robert Salas. I'm had experience in the 60s at Malmstrom Air Force Base as a missile launch officer. When this incident happened, right afterwards, we were ordered to sign a non-disclosure statement, and that had very strict penalties if we broke that. The incident was classified. However, since it had been a long period of time, they were going to declassify what I'll call the Echo flight shutdown of 10 missiles. The Echo flight incident happened March 16th, 1967. Ours happened 8 days later, March 24th, 67. In addition to that, there have been many other incidents involving UFOs at nuclear missile sites. It happened again at Minot in 1968. It happened at Whiteman Air Force Base, right, and other bases, similar incidents. It took time to get to the point where I realized that we were certainly not alone in the universe. And I had plenty of time, of course, because I couldn't talk about it. But eventually I did get to that point, and it was a kind of awakening that what we were doing on Earth here, building up nuclear stockpiles, having the ability to completely destroy every living thing on the planet, was not acceptable, not only to us, but to others in the cosmos. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki still haunt me. I think about that a lot. And the fact that we could easily be involved in nuclear war today. We've done it with Chernobyl, we've done it with Fukushima. That's immoral. It's immoral to the whole human race. We can't just adopt the morals or ethics of one particular country or group of people. We're talking about humanity as a whole and how we fit into the cosmos. You know, we are, it should be obvious to everyone by now that we are not alone. And it's ridiculous to think that we are. And the entities have spoken. They have said, you should not have nuclear weapons.
My name's Peter Maxwell Slattery, and I'm from Australia, and I'm a lifelong experiencer with probably the largest catalogue of UFOs, paranormal activity captured on camera and video in the world. There's so many different types of crafts that I've filmed, whether they look like they're plasma, they're morphing, changing shape, these egg-shaped type crafts, pearls, and that's, you know, we look at the translated word of Buddha, they talk about pearls in the sky that brought the gods down to earth to visit man. I've always been an experiencer since a young age. It started off with telepathy. Not long after that, I started to see grey aliens, but they were white. I didn't know if they were alien, you know, angels, demons. I just didn't know what it was. My journey with coming out about my experiences was the hardest thing I have and ever will do, in my opinion. I've been shot at. I've had death threats. I get hate mail almost on a daily basis. And I didn't ask to go on the news or to talk about this. I had the news come to me and ask me if they could use my footage, and I just wanted to know what the hell was going on. I went and got brain scans, I went and talked to people. I thought I was literally going insane. A lot of us do think about suicide. We think about just going away and never ever seeing anybody ever again, or just completely forgetting about this reality and going back to a 3D life. To tell my mother and father, my brother, my step-brothers and sisters, friends, I was sort of stupid to some extent, thinking people are just going to believe this because I experienced it. Because when it's happening, it's like, you know, the world needs to know this. This is the most important subject. It goes through everything to do with energy, agriculture, society, everything we can think of, space travel, our consciousness and how we treat each other. This, hands down, is the most important issue. Every aspect of your reality changes when you're experiencing what I call multidimensional reality. An experience that I've had that really touched my heart with the start of all this was I was in my lounge room and broad daylight, middle of the day, and I was approached to what I can only call is liquid blue light beings. Now, before this experience, I'd seen these liquid blue light orbs coming in and out of my house. I didn't know what it was, but one day they appeared as 7-foot tall light beings. They were all male, they were all female, and the information exchange from that experience, it didn't last too long, but there was like, it's almost like somebody stuck a USB stick in your consciousness and all this data, imagery, information of a wide range of scope on different aspects of not just humanity, but who we are, where we come from. All this data just came flooding in. But the information from this being was relaying to who I am, that I need to wake up and remember who I really am. It comes down to something that I call Operation Starseed. And why I say starseeds, not just are we from the stars, we are from Source, an overall collective. They showed me the makeup of this reality. I've shown other universes, and each universe we could call Source or God, and it had its own planes and dimensions that created another super intelligence. These universes were cell of a bigger intelligence. And so from that understanding and that experience, they were showing me that we've come down the planes and dimensions, the strongest souls right now, to help uplift the consciousness evolution here. We're here for conscious evolution to help humanity help themselves.
So what we have on Earth is a wide variety of different extraterrestrial races who cherry-picked DNA from all over the galaxy. Let's look at this particular population. Let's look at this particular population. They're all fundamentally human, or humanoid at least, because that's a constant throughout the galaxy. But this particular human race has a spiritual sense. This particular race has telekinesis. This particular race has telepathy, or has some sort of unique resiliency. And can we chop that out and then make our own designer humans who have the best of everything we can find all throughout the galaxy?
Over 60 of these genetic farmer race groups came together and formed a super federation. And this super federation was formed to help them manage this great experiment that was made up of 22 different genetic experiments on human beings on this planet. Some of the examples of how they would make these genetic changes is that they would use viruses as delivery systems. They would make changes to certain genetic markers or genome in this virus and use the virus as a delivery system. And not only did the virus deliver the genetic changes to the civilizations they were working on, but they also were used to cull off the weaker genetics and allow the experiment to thrive. These genetic programs were developed to boost or enhance the natural evolution or ascension of the beings on the planet. And what they would do is they would take a genetic approach where they would tinker with our genetics. And instead of allowing eons of time for genetic changes to occur, they would cause them almost instantaneously. So on our planet, we have all of these different genetic experiments that are in some cases competing with each other. To prevent these experiments from mixing with each other or wiping each other out, they began to develop social norms and different ways for these cultures to self-police and protect their own genetic experiment from being interfered with. So as they're helping us evolve genetically, they're also helping us evolve on a consciousness level. They bring us various belief systems, religions. They instill social norms in us that help us self-police ourselves and manicure our consciousness along with our genetics to develop them in tandem. Even today, these experiments are compartmentalized through religion, language, geographic location, and culture. And there's also a cosmic component. The goal is that eventually the civilization that they're experimenting on and working on become self-guiding. They get to a point to where they control their own genetics and their own consciousness development, as well as join this super federation in going out to other planets and assisting those civilizations in the same process. Now that we've developed to a point of traveling the cosmos ourselves, we've gotten to a point to where we're self-managing ourselves, and this super federation is being disbanded, and we're taking over our own genetic and spiritual development. As a result of all of this, the infrastructure that has been built out secretly in our solar system will now be handed over to the rest of humanity.
Another very important point to note here is that the DNA changes that the genetic farmers put into us are at this point still predominantly dormant. They are, if you will, locked up in the 95+% of our DNA that appears to not normally be used, which our scientists call junk DNA.
We only use about 5 to 10% of our DNA for building our body. They call these coding DNA sequences, meaning that they code proteins to make our physical body with. 90 to 95% of our DNA is non-coding DNA. In other words, mainstream science has no idea what this DNA really does. They call it, quote, junk DNA. Why would any sort of intelligent designer put junk in our body? Put something in our body that's useless? That wouldn't happen. In fact, what I believe is that this 90 to 95% of junk DNA is actually used metaphysically. It's used for our consciousness in ways that we just don't really understand yet.
My name is John D'Souza. I was an FBI special agent for 25 years. One of the things that I notice at the FBI and in any law enforcement group really is that they are demonstrative of the larger rule that there's always a percentage in any segment that demonstrate these extraordinary powers, these extraordinary abilities, 5, 6, 7%. Luckily for us, they save extraordinary numbers of people's lives using those abilities. I think what sets these people, this segment of the population, what sets them apart from everyone else is that they have some kind of marker that designates them as having parts of their DNA activated that the majority population doesn't have. And that's something that's evident no matter where you go in every group. There's always that segment, that remainder of people that they just activate. One of the first great experiences of the paranormal that was shared by me and hundreds of other law enforcement officers was what we called the Indigo Kids of 9/11. This was groups of little kids as young as 5, 6, 7 years old, all over the United States, that in the weeks and just days before the 9/11 terrorist attacks, they had cognitive experiences of what was going to happen. And they displayed those experiences the way the little kids would. At school, sometimes they did it with drawings, with finger paints, with arts and crafts, representing burning buildings where people were jumping out of the buildings. And no one really paid that much attention to it until 9/11 happened. And then we in law enforcement, we set up all these intel centers saying, report anything at all that occurred just before 9/11, anything suspicious, anything at all, doesn't matter what it is. And people did. People reported these little kids. They reported them as having dreams and visions and arts and crafts representing what happened on 9/11. So we had to go investigate these little kids for possible connection to terrorism and their parents. We had to go question them, and we did. And in every case, they had a vision, they had a sense, they had a remote viewing, they had something of that sort, and there was no physical explanation how they could have known. And that's the Indigo Kids of 9/11. It's very evident to me that corporations and government intel agencies are very intent on monitoring and identifying everyone who's had these anomalous experiences, because they want to identify them, because later on, they're probably going to scoop them up. It's like gun registration. You got to know where the guns are so you can get them all later on.
Now, certain cosmic laws were established for these genetic experiments. To avoid violating these cosmic laws, some of these ET genetic farmer races would incarnate as humans and allow themselves to be experimented upon. These genetic farmer races would also incarnate here for raising our consciousness. We have various people like Tesla and Einstein who are most likely starseeds or incarnates of these extraterrestrials. These people brought philosophies and scientific principles that radically changed our civilization.
One of my favorite quotes from Nikola Tesla is that he said the gift of mental power comes from God, the divine being, and if we concentrate our minds on that truth, we become in tune with this great power. So I think what Tesla was trying to tell us is that there is this sort of divine intelligence out there that every single one of us has access to if we choose to access it, if we do what's necessary, if we open our minds up to access or to tap into that greater intelligence.
According to the different contactees that I've interviewed, basically what we're witnessing at the very moment is a temporal war between different extraterrestrial groups. There's a positive extraterrestrial group, predominantly human-looking, that basically want us to develop our civilization along the path of an ethical, responsible civilization where we basically become part of a galactic community. There's another extraterrestrial group that are aggressive, and they want the Earth to be basically develop along the lines of a tyrannical civilization.
In a way, these 22 experiments were similar to competing term papers. Each of these races were trying to make their experiment the one that came out on top. So they would often sabotage each other's experiments. And one of the ways they did this was to manipulate time. And this is what led to the Mandela effect that we're experiencing today.
The Mandela effect is this idea that people have different recollections of historical events. The most famous one is some people remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison and others don't. What the Mandela effect represents is it's an echo of this temporal war that different extraterrestrial groups are trying to take us down one timeline or the other, depending on which faction is dominant at any time.
There's a long history of colonization projects and starting over. The best evidence of that is called Gosford glyphs in Australia. So the first landings were actually in Australia, not in Africa. It's written in the stone on the Gosford glyphs, and it talks about how a ship came down. There was a Denisovian man, the original man that was here. They added their genetics to him, and they created the hybrids.
When they did this, they manipulated to create basically the Aboriginal, the original people. And it was so they could incarnate into that body and have the Earth human experience. When I talked to the king of the Raven tribe, Wilcock Brendan Murray, a lot of his information tied in with James and myself through contacts.
The tribe used to meet the star people there. And then what happened was it was all positive and consensual. But then something happened at a time where other beings were turning up and started to actually remove people from that site and take them on their crafts. And in a time when the human DNA had that multi-strain, like 6 double helixes instead of the 2 that we've been hindered to, where the people would transform and escape these the kidnappings from these crafts, and the older people informed me that they were taking people off to other continents and creating new humans out of our DNA here, and it was a group from the Orions who were meant to be coming and doing the kidnapping, a negative ET group. Right across this continent, the DNA become attached to the land, and the land attached to the actual DNA. We are no different to the planet itself. We're just a fractal. I know that there was 7 major forms of our DNA created in the first place. And I know that some people talk about when there was 7 major forms of DNA was first created, that they created another, like a future form of another 5, like semitones, for the development of the interbreeding, so that when these different physical aspects come together to create new life, then the soul structure was different as well from the previous generations. So that soul structure was already implemented in the ethos. So it's like music, there's 7 major tones, 5 semitones, which makes 12. The creators understood that there was a time when these 7 major forms of humans were going to start to mingle. And so they allotted these 5 extra tones of semitones for them people to be interbred with and to become interracial.
Now, a lot of elders, whether it's in America or Australia or other cultures, they talk about that they were seeded by the Pleiadians. We also have a lot of rock paintings and cave art depicting what we call the Wangina, the sky beings.
My name is Clifford Mahudi. I'm a Zuni Pueblo Indian, and I have been working to get a lot of information among the indigenous groups, especially the North American Indians and our neighbors to the south, our brothers and sisters, the Mesoamerican Indian people. And I'm doing this because it is about time that we start gathering the information to convey and pass on to future generations. The origins of those protocols were provided by what, again, we call the star people, or are the spiritual people from different realms, primarily from what we call the sky people, and also the deities that they brought in from other parts of the cosmos. They were put in place so that they have one way of worship. If you look at it in terms of the origin of what we are going, we started out is that technology and spirituality were in connected, real tight in the beginning. And throughout the ages, they've separated technology away from the spirituality, and then it becomes a hard science. And somewhere in that path, man invented religion. Religion was primarily for three basic reasons. First of all, it was fear. And of course, the other one was control. And the third one was greed. And so it worked against spirituality. The indigenous community had technology that was performed through the conscious methodology. For example, there was remote viewing.
I'm John Vivanco, and I've been in remote viewing for over 20 years. I was working in a civilian think tank. We were civilian operation, yet we were utilized by some of those in government. And usually the stuff in government was bizarre things. It was never normal type stuff. There's one case that we've really dug into, and that's the case of J.C. Brown. He claims that he came across a cave that went, 11, 14 miles underground. And he came across what he called the village, eventually he called the village, which was these cutout rooms. In these rooms, he found giant mummies that were up to 12 feet tall. We decided to take this case, see if we can find out first if it's real. What's going on here? Digging into these giants, we went further, right? So we also go and we identify the location where we can find them, the whole 9 yards. But as far as the giants are concerned, these are from an ancient civilization. These beings have been on Earth for a very long time. When we looked at where they originally came from, it was a seeding on one side, like humans, for instance, and then alien intervention, where they had genetically manipulated this species to be the way they are. And what happened with them was that there was a major cataclysm. This is probably around the time of the flood, so they were still around. And a major cataclysm occurred, especially up in the flooding, up in the Pacific Northwest, that wiped them out. And this cave system that these guys went to, these giants went to, was them trying to escape and get out of the way of this cataclysm. Now, you had humans who survived this cataclysm.